Hi students, welcome to HSC Earth and Environmental Science and Module 8 Resource Management. This is video number 12. We're going to be focusing a little this time on the environmental impact of waste disposal. You need to be able to evaluate the sustainability of a named waste management option, for example, environmental impact of waste disposal. So what we want to do this time is we want to focus in a little bit more on sanitary landfill, some of the environmental implications associated with landfill, and then look at one very short case study of a company that's actually trying to do something about the rehabilitation of not only a local mine site, but also of ways of improving their management of wastes, and specifically in the area of energy production, which is what we talked about in the last video. I think in a lot of ways the issues that we're trying to cover when we look at waste management are fairly straightforward, and a lot of them you would be already aware of. So some of it is trying to just leverage into the information that you're already aware of, some of your own experiences, and to then be able to extend those and put them into a context. So let's pick three very important and very obvious environmental impacts of waste management strategies. Specifically, what we want to focus on here is landfill. There's an acronym that is often used in this context, and the acronym is NIMBY, which stands for Not in My Backyard. We all throw a lot of waste away. We all fill our bins every week, and we know that that's the case. And we know that they have to go somewhere. We're quite happy for the garbage trucks to come along, pick them up and take them away so we don't have to look at them anymore. But that garbage has to go somewhere. One of the problems, I guess one of the first things that's most noticeable about these sorts of areas of landfill is the visual. It's a tip. It just doesn't look good. It's piles and piles of garbage. Some of it's half rotting, all sorts of stuff that people throw away that they don't want anymore. It just doesn't have much visual appeal. Mountains and mountains of this stuff piling up over time. Maybe occasionally you're going to get some of this garbage being covered with a little layer of clay that's going to kind of cover some of the visual so it doesn't look quite so bad. But in the process, other things may well happen as well that are going to contribute in a detrimental way to the environmental impact that these sorts of waste management processes actually have. You kind of know that you're going to come into contact with a tip before you even see it. You can probably smell it. There is a very significant odor associated with waste as it starts to break down. Sometimes you can even tell that from bins that you've walked past without them actually sort of festering around for some hours, days, or weeks. So this compromises the quality of the air. The decomposition of all sorts of materials, particularly organic material, by decomposers often results in the release of a lot of different a little cocktail of chemicals that can really create terrible odors. And in fact, that's one of the biggest concerns associated with tips. Not necessarily their visual impacts, because sometimes they're kind of behind a hill or somewhere else, but particularly with prevailing winds, if you can't see them, you can smell them, and they're not good. And as we've talked about in a previous video, one of the other big impacts, or at least potential impacts, that we've really tried to minimize is this whole area of leachate. That is, when we dump our rubbish, if we just kind of stick it on the soil that's there, bury it a little bit, grab our tractors and scrape some of the soil, some of the sand, some of the clay over the top, then that's fine. But what's going to happen is that then when it rains, some of that rainwater is going to go into the waste. It's going to extract some chemicals, and you're going to end up with quite a mix of potentially quite toxic chemicals that are going to then leach through the base of that waste pile, and then in through the layers of the soil, potentially into the groundwater below. The leachate itself can be quite damaging to the environment, to the plants and animals that live in an area, and also to humans who live in the area as well, which is one of the reasons why we talked about some of the ways of trying to produce a more sanitary landfill, one that was much better contained, and so there was much less opportunity for these sorts of materials to be leaking out and moving into the waterways. But the problem is tips still look like tips. They're horrible places to look at. They are quite smelly places to be around. And so part of what we've been looking at is a range of technologies that have been designed to try and improve the environmental impact of the dumping of wastes, of landfill. And one company that's been associated with progress in this area, Veolia. They're the company that manages the Woodlawn waste management facility, which is just near Goulburn in New South Wales, and they have quite an ambitious project to be able to use some of that waste for energy generation. So we talked about how energy production, energy recovery, and energy production, two very important processes that are part of good waste management. But in addition to that, they can also have an impact on the environment. And you can see from the two photos here that we've got a mine reclamation site. So there's a mine site here that's part of the area that's managed by Veolia. You can also see that their energy production plant is in the foreground there, and you can see the kind of scarring that can be left on the land in association with these sorts of processes that are happening. So one of the plans for this particular site is that we fill that mine site up. We use as much as we can to manage the dumping of landfill, and we rehabilitate the site as well. And that's one of the challenges that Veolia have undertaken, is not just to see if they can do a whole lot more recycling so that they can repurpose a lot of that waste material into energy generation through bioreactors. So this is really a form of biofuel that's actually going to be generated here, and it's going to be used for the generation of electricity. So a real genuine attempt to try and recover a lot of those waste products, do something to improve the general appearance of the environment through landfill and through rehabilitation of the surface, and then also in association with all of that to actually see if there's ways of being able to produce energy as a result of the output of some of the decomposition processes that are occurring with organic waste, for example. I think it's important to be able to have some, at least one example that you can talk about, that is the context of a lot of this section on waste management, is that you look at a process or you look at a part of the waste management cycle and think about what are some of the impacts that they have, how could we do things differently, how could we improve the processes in order to reduce the amount of waste, what can we do before we get to throwing something away, are there other things that we can do in the meantime, and as a result of that, can we reduce the environmental impact that we're having as a result of all of these wastes. Now you can also look at things, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is one. There's a huge amount of plastics and microplastics that are creating great problems in our oceans. So of course that's another form of waste and another environmental impact that you could look at in a little bit more detail. So some of it is just kind of linking into some of the experiences that you already have. Think about things you can use as examples to write about and focus in on exactly what sort of environmental impact these sorts of waste management processes might be having. Thanks for watching.